Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, discussing all things audiobooks with the authors that write the stories and the narrators that perform them. Brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 6, Episode 3 of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. Today, I am chatting with narrator and author Eric Dove. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've been listening to you narrate books for eons at this point, it seems.
It seems like I've been narrating books for eons at this point. Yeah.
Right? So I'm excited. I was like, I've been doing this for like 10 plus years. I'm like, why have I not had Eric on this show? And so email sent, the date set, and here we are. So I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Very happy to be here. It's a very, very cool show you've got, and I'm happy to be on it.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Bill, the check will be sent in the mail later. We're going to start like we always do, having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, and how you got started.
Okay. I think it was back around 2009 when I first started. I lived in Ohio at that time, and I was a full-time musician. I did a lot of songwriting down in Nashville, and I was kind of commuting back and forth to Nashville. I had an apartment down there, but en route, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. It's about a 6-hour drive, and that kind of became my method of not wrecking my car in the middle of the night driving. But I'd been recording music in my own singing voice for years, already had a pretty good studio set up, and I've always kind of been into theater and dabbled in some indie acting with some buddies who were, videographers and things like that. And I thought, this seems like something that I might enjoy doing. And I put together a little demo of some voices and a few segments out of books that I liked, and sent them around to 30 or 40 publishers probably. Back then it wasn't as easy to apply for things online. It was very, kind of send them literally a CD, but I didn't hear anything for a year. So it took that long. I kept pestering a few of them, but I finally got my first book from Brilliance Audio up in Michigan, which actually was J.R. Ward. That was my first book.
Nice.
So in those early days, I was driving up to Brilliance to do all the books that I did up there in their studio, which was only a handful for the first couple of years. And I started hitting up other publishers and doing a lot of stuff for independent authors. And after about 2 or 3 years of kind of just doing a couple books here and there on the side, it finally sort of snowballed into enough to support me full time. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since. So, that's pretty much it. It was tough to get into back then. I think it probably is now too, but just kind of kept. I'm very persistent and annoying, and so I keep. If you get an email from me that's like, "Hey, would you like to have me narrate a book for you?" It's not the last one you're going to get. So,
well, see, you think like persistent and nice. I'm going dedicated and passionate.
All right, there you go. I'm going to shift to those terms, I think.
Yes. Well, 16 years working for human resources for the Walt Disney World Company does get you a bit of those expertise on how to flip things around.
Yeah. My wife also worked briefly for the Empire down there.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay. I think
she was a fairy godmother in training, I believe, something like that.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. I think it's a rite of passage to some extent if you're either born and raised in the area and you're still living here, or if you're just going to be for a chunk of time in the Florida, Orlando area to kind of like work for Disney to at some capacity. It looks good on your it really is. But also at the same time, it looks really good on your resume once you're no longer in Florida.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's good. It's definitely, you kind of mentioned it, how it was harder back then. I think it was harder back then to get into narration because a lot of folks didn't even know that was a possibility as a gig to do it. And then also like, how do you go about finding out who to email to, or even to reach out to? Now people have social media.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Or the website
back
says
then, it
I'm
was
the
hard to
casting.
even, hard to even find the resource, like who on earth even makes audiobooks and how do I get a hold of them? There was plenty of companies, but yeah, that information was not easy to get a hold of for, the first 5 or 6 years for sure.
But your persistence and your passion for this really took off.
Passion.
Yes, absolutely. So Audible we tend to use Audible a little bit because it's the only right now, knock on wood, there will be others platform that kind of tells you that when you search by a narrator, how many books they've published. But really what it means is how many books are on their website. And so Audible right now is saying that you have 456. I'm sure it's more at this point.
It's a few more. Yeah.
But if you go backwards and do set up for older to newer or newer to older and have it be like, go to that first set of pages, it does have The Discipline by Stephen Contis, I think it is, as your first book, but Covet by J.R. Ward, a novel of the fallen angels, is their second book. They're listed, but that is how I found you. That is how you came into my atmosphere. And I'm like, well, hello, sir.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's funny because the first one I actually performed was Covet. I think it released later than those two. I did those two really close together. And that first series of J.R. Ward's is still one of my favorites. And Stephen Hunter is one of my all-time favorites. I've done a bunch of his books since then. But that one, it was only my second book, and it was just such a good book, and it was so raw and gritty that it kind of set the tone for me as to what kind of things I like to narrate, and it also set the understanding that a really good book makes my job really easy. And having experienced both sides of that throughout my career, I appreciate it even more now. But that's still one of my favorite books of all time. Dirty White is just awesome.
Yeah. And for the J.R. Ward, it's a paranormal in this case. And so you're, as starting into recording, you're thrown into J.R. Ward's world where, she's a fantastic author and writer and storyteller. But she's also like, oh, I'm going to throw some angels in there and a demon and, and you're going, whoa.
Well, and the erotic aspect of it was not something I expected to be thrown into on my first book either.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's spicy, but
which none of that stuff, I don't bat an eye at any of it anymore. It's funny, but when I first got that very first book, I'm reading through and I'm like, oh wow, I gotta say that in front of 2 people in the studio, and now it's, I understand I appreciate it much more than I did back then.
But it's also a little different to do it in studio in front of 2 people, right? Versus flash forward now maybe in your own booth where you're just you yourself and nobody else. And also more experience, and you're going, oh, Mrs. Ward, what have you done?
Well, the fun thing though, and I do miss I do miss recording in studio because that's just not something I do now. I do everything from my own studio, but I do miss it because it was kind of fun being in the presence of a producer and an engineer, because all the people I worked with up at Brilliance were super fun and very chill, and and so if we'd hit something extremely risque in the script, there's always kind of a funny angle to it, and often you stop rolling to have a good laugh about it, or somebody interjects a funny line right in the middle of it, or so it was better to have fun with it back then with those people, and I'm sure that's kind of what gets most narrators kind of over that, if they have that hump of, "Ooh, this is something these words have never come out of my mouth before,"
At least not in public.
You get past it much easier. So
yeah. One of the narrators I have spoken with, her name is Lorelei King. She's fantastic, and she shared a story where she was narrating in a studio, and it was an engineer there, and she just looked up at him and said the lines. I was like, girl. She's like, well, it's got to be some fun to make them blush a little bit. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's good. A good approach. I like that.
Yeah, well, you gotta have some fun, right? But for me, I mean, I love her writing, but for me, like I said, I had started reading her books, and then reality, as far as work goes, I'm like, crap, I have to adult. Got into the audiobooks, and then so when this series, adulting, things they don't tell you when you're like 16. I just want to be an adult. Shut up. No, you don't. Right. But one thing that kind of caught me off guard from you was you had this cadence, and you still do. Even when we first started talking, I'm like, there it is. There's your voice does a thing. Like, it's almost like there's some grittiness to it. But I was like, okay, that's like, we all have like something that we do, we're known for. And I was like, okay, maybe is that it? Is that, it's going to continue. Okay, yeah, and it's good. So it's not like, stop thing. But it was just one of those things where you were able to kind of bring so much emotion to these characters that, are 6 feet tall and, special ops. And then, of course, there's Davina, the villain, and the demon, and you're still doing it. I'm going, wow, okay.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's really, really nice to hear. Those are in every book I've done, the scenes where they actually kind of open up or something traumatic has happened, and it's not just a shoot 'em up scene or whatever, and the characters are revealing something or going through something. Those are always my favorite parts, and I never know sometimes if I'm overdoing those parts, because it sounds really ridiculous, but there's countless books where in the middle of a scene like that, I'm like, I've got tears in my eyes, and I have to stop for a minute because my voice gets all goofy, and I assume that's a good thing, that the author wrote that in a way that made me feel it enough for it to come through the characters in the way it was intended. So whenever that happens, I'm usually pretty happy about it. I got to take a minute, but it's a good thing. And it happens in all kinds of books. It doesn't have to be a literary fiction, tearjerker. It can be a special ops, action book. There's a lot of authors really are very good at that kind of stuff. And
they're proud of it. They are proud of making us cry. They are proud. Yeah. I know some authors have their like coffee mugs that say, tears of the readers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing that kills me is, like, especially in so many of the romance series, there's a type of hero, there's a type of leading man, and it's easy, I'm sure, for the reader or listener to picture this guy. They're on the covers, it can be kind of cliche, and then still somewhere in the middle of that book, they'll get me. And I'm like, God, I can't believe that guy made me cry. Like, so well, they're good at what they do.
Yes. Has it happened also too, where it's not the crying, but like the hysterics because it was just so fucking funny? Right. Has that happened too?
That has happened a few times, and from my end of it, like, I can see it coming. I can see it happening, and so occasionally I have to sit there and think about it for a minute, because you can stumble through some of those scenes a little too quickly and not maybe capture what the author is trying to get past. And the funny scenes are hard to know. It's like with the emotional teary scenes, something has worked if it's working on you, but with the funny stuff, it's hard to know sometimes if you've conveyed what they were trying to do, until you hear somebody later on say, "Oh my God, that cracked me up," and then you're like, "Oh yeah, well, good."
Yeah, but also delivery is so important, and sometimes if there's a dry humor there, or in some cases, like I know, like with my husband, he thinks it's hilarious. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not. Right. But especially if you're prepping the book. Now, has your process changed from when you first started that first book to now, fast forward all these eons later, as I like to say, the prepping process? Yeah. How's that changed?
It's changed a lot. It changed a lot because, one, I've been doing it long enough that I kind of understand the author cues a lot better, and it's pretty easy for me to pick up the idea of a character quickly, so I don't really have to do a full read through of most books now. And the other reason for that is because I'm working from home. if I get something completely wrong, I can go back and fix it, and sometimes that's not my fault, because I'll get 2/3 of the way through a book, and the author will give me the character cue that such and such suddenly has a Scottish accent, and I'm like, oh, seriously? And so I got to go back and fix all those Scottish accents in there. That doesn't happen very often. Back when I first started doing it, though, when you're working in a studio and you have a producer and an engineer, you have to go through and read the entire book and mark out the character attributes and how you're going to do the voices, just so that you are not slowing things down for everybody. When you're working on your own in your own studio, you have the luxury of, dealing with your own mess if you make one. So, yeah, so usually I don't need to do a lot of reading ahead. I do some still. There are times when you get to a part of a book and the way it's being written, you can tell there's some surprises around the corner that you probably need to know about before you start rolling. And so I'll find myself reading ahead a few chapters in real time and then going back and picking it up from there. So yeah, it's definitely changed a lot. And I mean, again, I've been doing it so long that back when I was prepping scripts in the beginning, it was literally a paper script in a binder with highlighters. So,
binders. I miss
crazy?
Binders. Yeah.
I can't even imagine it now. Now it's everything.
Slide.
Obviously, it's just on an iPad where you carry it around, and it was pretty wild. I wonder if I've still got some of those. I probably do. Yeah.
Oh, those are really, yeah.
I don't know where I put them. Now I want to go find them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's, I remember seeing videos, and even some, when people were recording back then with papers, how they had to be very careful on how to flip the page. So the mic didn't pick up that of the paper flipping,
right?
And stuff. And then now it's just like, you just kind of like, you see it now where they're sliding their fingers up or across to go to the next page. I'm like, how times have changed.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. There was a very specific method that one of the producers showed me right off the bat. And you take everything out of the binder, and so your pages are stacked. And there's a specific way that you do it so that when you move the page over, you're not flipping it, but then you don't get them out of order. Think about that. It's simple but clever.
Yeah. Well, hey.
And you have to be very careful about it. So, because if you're on a roll, you don't want to mess it up with a crinkle.
Got to go back to that emotional scene because of that one little flip of a page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The olden times.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember listening, like my first book audiobook ever was a vinyl of Pinocchio from Disney. Back in, like 85, where I was like 5 or less and stuff like that. I still have it. And then now to have it be where my kid, who's going to be 22 soon, is busting out with, well, I'm going to go buy a vinyl. I'm like, I remember wanting to get away from like having to stick my pencil in the cassettes to rewind because the thing got right. Yeah. And then the CDs when they were getting scratched, and then now they're going to go back to being all this, nostalgia. I'm like, well, the technology has gotten better. I don't think there's a whole lot of scratching of vinyls nowadays. No. But then I'm going, why are they up on your wall? Like, because they're pretty. I'm like, you're not playing them? They're like, no.
Yeah, I have a bunch of those too. Those are all music for me. I'm old enough that I've got a nice collection of original albums from when I was a kid. Nice. And those will probably wind up on a wall at some point too.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing to do. Like, I mean, I collect stuff too. And in my case, as some people would like to say, those are the trophies for the trophy case, aka books. I have like the ones from J.R. Ward and hers that signed that series. I'm just waiting for you to show up at a convention or something.
Nice.
So you can get, so I can get your autograph done on those too. So is that something?
Cool. That's really cool.
Is that something that you're thinking about doing now that the narrators are attending more events, but also you as an author now, because we're going to talk about that too, because you're also writing. So you have the first book out called Ghosts. It's called Ghosts of Royston. Am I saying that right?
Royston, yeah. Ghosts of Royston. Yeah, it's a town in Tennessee, or it was a town in Tennessee back before it was flooded, back in the 40s. So that my writing story is a little weird. I wrote that book actually over 10 years ago. But my narrating career was taken off as I was sort of finishing that up, and it sort of took over, and I didn't have the same kind of time to write as I did previous to that. And so I did some promotion, and it did fairly well on its own as an independent back then. And it's always something I wanted to go back to, but just career and time and all that just got in the way. But recently I've found the time, and I've really found the inclination to do it. And so I'm almost done with book 2. It's a series between the two, and there's a third one that'll be after that very soon as well. But yeah, it's been an interesting trip to go back and sort of, I kind of revived that first book, did some edits to make sure it wasn't there weren't too many cultural references in it to start with. So it stands up fine in the style of book it is, as far as being, current and all that. So that's sort of the story with that one. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I've redesigned covers, and we're doing all the marketing stuff, and it's kind of a new adventure.
Yeah. So what bit you? They always kind of say the acting bug, right? But the writing bug has been happening a lot lately too. And you have these stories in you. It's one thing to narrate them because you're getting a completed story, right, and you're putting your interpretation on it. But what made you go, "Ooh, I'm gonna write a book, and this is the story"?
Well, narrating did, and you're right. It's sort of a natural progression, and I don't know if it's the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of narrators have, through their career, decided to start writing things, because I think part of it is, we're already creative type people. I've been a musician and a songwriter forever, and you sit and you narrate other people's books and stories and characters, and not only do you sort of develop an ear for really, really good storytelling and characters, but you really start to identify bad ones too. And so it starts to feel like, at least somewhere buried down in your toolkit, you kind of understand a lot of what to do and what not to do as far as putting together a good story. And that's how I felt when I wrote the book the first go. I had been narrating, I just wasn't doing it completely full time yet. But I was already starting to feel like it was kind of helping that storyteller inside me to get a grip on how to go about it. And honestly, I was just doing it for fun. I was also working at a production company in Ohio back then, and we did commercials and productions for companies who were like throwing a conference for all their top sellers and all that kind of stuff. And I was the stage set guy, but I had all these friends who were into video and audio production. And so they were constantly writing scripts and making little indie movies, and I was, playing parts in them. And so I kind of had that notion in my head. I started writing it as a screenplay, and it was nothing at all like what it turned into. But as I started writing, it just sort of started changing, and I'm like, this feels like a longer story, and it would change and morph. And pretty soon I'm like, I think this might be a freaking novel. How the hell did I do that? And so I kind of backtracked a little bit, and Stephen King is one of my favorite authors of all time. And he had written a book called On Writing not too long before that. And I just read his book about his personal process and kind of emulated it. It was a very cool book on how he does things and sort of letting the characters tell the story, even to you. You don't know what they're going to do until they do it. So that's sort of how it came about. It wasn't intended to even be a novel. And then it got bigger and bigger, and I started to really, really enjoy it. And so then I got some help by reading books by Stephen King and some others. And next thing you know, I managed to finish it in about 3 months. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was like my favorite creative process that I've ever taken part in my entire life. And so I've always wanted to continue with it. And now I am, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that sometimes we forget that as creatives, there's always something that's going to inspire or give us an idea, and then it just doesn't go away until you write it down. And I mean, you being a musician, because you were also writing your own songs to write the melody to and all that stuff.
Yeah, I've been doing that forever. Yeah.
So it's also like storytelling. It just happens to be via music as well, or adding those tones to it. So yeah,
right. And that was a progression. I was writing country back then. I was traveling to Nashville and writing for a couple of small publishing companies down there. So very much a storytelling medium.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially country. I mean, you get there from this where he met her and he had a dog, and then and at least in romance, do not mess with the dog. You can do anything else, just don't mess with the dog
anywhere.
Yeah.
That's why John Wick was so hugely popular.
Right.
They fucking killed the dog.
I
Nobody
know.
could believe it. They're like, what? So then you have to watch so that the bad guy gets his comeuppance. It doesn't matter how many people die.
It's because he's doing it also for his dog.
Avenge the dog. Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely with country songs, you do get an entire story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and what that looks like varies based on the singer and the story itself. But yeah, it's definitely something that I was like, okay, as I was learning more about you and stuff, like, okay, this makes sense. I mean, if he's writing his own songs and then he's doing narration, storytelling is already in him. It's just bound to happen. It also depends on if he's going to be doing things like fiction or historical stuff, or more vampires and who knows what else is. I mean, aliens. It could be so many different options nowadays. Yeah.
And I definitely the paranormal aspect is something I've kind of been in love with. Again, I'm a Stephen King fan from way back. I know a lot of people are, but the thing I love about Stephen King is how focused he is on characters, one, and then two, there's almost always a paranormal angle. Sometimes it's really small in his books. Sometimes it's not there, and sometimes it's big. But something about that little hint of the unknown that you can't put your finger on, and maybe it never gets explained. I just, for some reason, I just love that, because that feels like real life to me, because there's so much going on around us that I don't think any of us really understand, and we probably never will, but you'd be a fool to deny it's there. And so to me, even though it's paranormal, it feels real to slip those things, that sort of vein, into a book. And Ghosts of Royston has it pretty heavily, and the one I'm finishing up now has even more of that. So I don't think I can't imagine writing something without it, honestly.
Yeah, there's one author that I always recommend, that if a reader or listener has never read a paranormal and they want to get into it, but they just don't know where to, but they love contemporary. I'm like, well, Danica Dark has her seven series, and it really is. It starts off, it's completely early contemporary romance that just happens to be where the hero's a shifter. It just happens. It's like, oh, okay, there it is. Okay, but it's so paranormal. I mean, it's so contemporary where it's, normal human beings, houses and stuff. It just doesn't jump into on a gloomy night, saw her flying.
Exactly. Slide it in there.
Yeah.
Get you comfortable with it first, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, you're going, okay, what's going to be the issue? What's going to keep them apart? Oh, he's a shifter. That makes sense. But
I've done quite a few of those books too, that was a brand new thing for me. Like, what is happening now? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, especially with romance, there's just so many different subgenres and they keep inventing more. And I'm like, stop renaming it. It's still fantasy. It's not romantasy. It's still fantasy.
Right.
But it's just,
it's kind of a shame in some ways that things do have to get so specifically labeled. I understand it. I mean, it's marketing. People have to understand what they're looking for, but it is kind of a bummer, because the best books kind of have a little bit of everything in them. They've got romance, and they've got action, and they've got tragedy, and a little bit of the unknown and unexplained, and so much. It's hard to write a really good book without at least hitting on most of those things. So
yeah, I think that's just also life. I mean, like, if you really think that you're losing your keys, it's probably a fairy moving things around, or the ghost is like, you still don't understand I'm here. I keep moving your shit around, but you still don't think I'm real. Sure. Okay. You just never know. Yeah. Now, you also have something very unique aside from your talents, that I don't think anyone, unless again, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but you live on a boat, which and you also work in your studio's in the boats, right?
Yeah, that is correct. We've so yeah, it doesn't seem weird to us because we've been doing it for so long, and we know so many people out here living the same weird life. But my wife and I were sailors for a long, long time before we met each other, even in Ohio, which sounds weird, but sailing small boats on a little lake. But when we got together, we kind of snowballed and wound up in Charleston with a bigger boat. We like to race sailboats, so that's what we did back then. And eventually, we moved aboard full time. We had our first live aboard boat was a 46-foot monohull, and we sold everything that we had on land and moved aboard. It was us and our son, who was 3 years old at the time, and our dog. And I built my studio into one of the cabins in the back of the boat, and that's where I did all my work from that point on. And we're on a different boat now. We're on a catamaran now. We switched a couple of years ago, sold the previous boat, bought this one, which is a little older actually, and kind of a fixer-upper. We have a YouTube channel, which if people aren't into sailing, they may not know there's a YouTube niche out there of these live aboard families, couples that go out and sail around the world and live on boats, and that's what our channel is kind of all about. And we've been doing that since we started. It's an unusual way to live, and it definitely can make narrating a challenge at times. But just like everything else, you keep coming at it from different angles, and you can always figure out a way. And it's worked out pretty well. We're in Grenada right now. We generally have been traveling around the Caribbean, back and forth to the U.S. Down here in Grenada is where you're generally safe from hurricanes this time of year. So a lot of sailors come down here and hole up for a couple months, and that's what we're doing right now. Yeah. So
you're missing all the fun of Helena.
I know, right? Well, we were in St. Martin, and again, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. The geography of the Caribbean, I think most people that don't come down here for any reason, don't really kind of realize how much area it takes up. It's like a huge swath of area between, Florida all the way down to South America. The Caribbean islands like stretch, I don't know, 700, 800 miles. So it's a long way. So we dodged a couple hurricanes this season already. We were in St. Martin later than most people would be when Beryl came through and actually hit the northern end of Grenada, where everybody goes to be safe. But we avoided that one. Then on our way down, Ernesto, which became a major hurricane later, passed over us as a tropical storm, and we found a particular anchorage that we knew would be good for that. And we saw 50 mile per hour, probably more than that, 55 mile per hour winds while we were sitting there. But we've kind of had a little bit of an adventure this year, dodging those as we come down to Grenada. But now we're kind of sitting here just waiting for the season to end, and we'll move on.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, as you said, like in cars, you say objects might be, further or closer than they really seem. It's the same thing with the maps. It looks like when we look at it, and it doesn't matter if we're doing it on an atlas or we're doing it on a globe, at a Home Goods, or online, and it makes it seem like there's not a whole lot of space, and these things are huge going across all the space. But the reality is, it's a lot bigger than it really seems.
Right. Even just the Bahamas is vast.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they travel to the Bahamas, they go on vacation and they go to a specific location, and the Bahamas is sort of distilled down to this notion of a couple islands in a lot of people's heads. And it's a massive area of islands. People cruise that area for years and never see it all. But it's been wild. It's been extremely challenging. And again, if a lot of people kind of understand this, if they watch the YouTube channels that focus on this, it seems like this very sort of idyllic life. And we came into it, I think, with a fairly level head because we'd been sailing for so long. Some people jump into this with zero experience on boats whatsoever, and it doesn't usually work out real well.
Mm-hmm. I had a friend of mine that we worked together, and her husband, they had recently gotten married, and they were in their later years a little bit, and they they did the whole thing where they retired or quit their jobs and stuff like that, sold everything, got on a boat. And so I would get emails from her. I'm like, hey, what do you recommend now? Because she listens to audiobooks. And I'm like, where are you now?
Yeah. And that's the kind of the truth of it. Our families don't even know where we are half the time. They can't keep up, with every movement we make.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I tell my kids or my sister when she's traveling, like, just make sure you put your location on so I can, make sure you're okay. Be a little different on a boat. But I was fascinated because the idea of, smaller quarters versus a house, right? And I'm looking around, I'm going, where would I put all my books? But also your studio. I know narrators are like, oh, I can't record today because the guy in front of the house is, mowing the lawn, or there's construction and stuff. And I'm going, you have the lovely waves that I usually fall asleep to, the sounds, other things too that's going on. Heaven forbid a bad storm.
Right. There's a lot of moving around. There's a lot of it's different. You're right. When I used to narrate on land, it was airplanes going by and helicopters and somebody mowing their yard or somebody deciding to roof their house across the street.
How dare they?
Yeah, I know. I'd walk out all mad and I'm like, oh yeah, they needed a new roof. It's okay. But here the really good part about boats is the interior of boats is very irregular. There's not a lot of parallel surfaces. And there's also a lot of soft surfaces, especially on a little bit older boats. The ceilings and walls are different kinds of vinyl and cloth. And again, like you said, the spaces are smaller. So from a sound aspect, it sounds awesome. You barely have to do anything in a cabin to make a good sounding audio booth. It's great. The downside is it's a boat, and so it is moving around. It's not as bad on the catamaran; is much better. It's a much more stable platform, but especially on the monohull, if you're rocking it all, the boat itself is making little tiny sounds that you wouldn't notice if you weren't trying to produce an audiobook. but when you are, you hear every little tiny creak or every tiny little twing in the rigging as a rope hits it, just as so every little thing. And you're right, if there's a storm blowing through, high winds, so it comes with its own set of challenges, but the plus side is the end result, the sound is fantastic. So sometimes it can be a little bit more of a struggle of patience to get through a project if we're fighting with things like that, but I found I don't have to work so hard to get a good sound out of the audiobook. And that part is great.
Yeah. Why do I have a feeling that someone's listening to this episode now and going, if I can get old boats and just put them together as if it's a studio, but on land.
Right. And somebody probably is,
Right, installation already done, also themed, especially here in Florida. You've got to have a theme, right? Yeah. Welcome to the Marina Studios.
We record in the head.
Yeah. But it is fascinating. I love the idea. The other day I was watching scrolling and someone came across a VR thing, and they were all like, it was so glammed up, but it was something going, see, that way I can probably do the RVing, but it's still, you got to have a different mindset, I think, when it comes down to doing that, but especially in the ocean. And I'm a Pisces, and I love the water. And so, but it's just one day I'll be able to do those, doing a cruise kind of thing and stuff like that thing. But it's definitely something to marvel at, because Mother Nature does a wonderful job, but also like trying to incorporate what you already do in an environment that's not what we would automatically have thought could be done in. So that's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, I've come across a couple of guys who have done some audio work who told me, "Oh, you can't do audiobooks on a boat." I'm like, "Oh, well, I have done a couple hundred, so it does work. It's just, it takes a little bit extra effort." But that's the whole boating life, honestly. Everything takes a little extra effort. We've been doing it long enough. We've been having a lot of discussions and contemplation about our next next moves in life. And then our son is now 8. So we may be moving back nearer to family sometime in the relatively near future to get a little bit of that sort of life for him. You know, that's one bad thing about being out here is you don't get to see family and old friends. You know, you'd love to think your friends are going to come visit you, but that's really tough for people to get sorted out a lot of time. And, you know, we manage to cruise with other boats that have kids, but then you always wind up going your separate ways, and that makes it tough for the kids as well. So we kind of we're thinking about getting him some land life for a couple of years, and then I'm sure we'll revisit this, and we still want to go sail Europe and a lot of other corners of the world that we haven't gotten to yet, but in due time.
Yeah. See, because again, misconceptions of what we're told thanks to, you know, movies and stuff. I'm going, well, you know, I'm sure he'll make friends with the dolphins.
And we have.
Right?
We have,
yeah. There's that one seagull. I might be talking about the Little Mermaid, but who never knows?
All that stuff really happened. We have, I mean, all the good stuff that you see, it does happen. Like, you know, you get dolphins dancing on the bow. You know, we've even swam with dolphins in an anchorage. That dolphin was a little too friendly, but we have birds that we're on a long passage. Some passages, you know, we're sailing for several days on open ocean, and a bird will just land in our cockpit, even on us, and just ride for hours because it's tired. You know, it got
free
too
ride.
far out from land. Yeah. And so there's so many cool things about it,
and they don't have to worry about stranger danger. You know,
right? No, because there's no strangers, there's no anybody.
Exactly. That's what that's. Yeah. I can. It seems like it's one of those things where you just want to get away from it all, going back on the boats. At least for you, if you continue to keep the same boats, you can go on those extended vacations, and if something has like a pickup has to happen, you can still do it. So that's always a good thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a lot of work. Yeah. But it's got a big payoff too. So
well, if it's not work, I think sometimes life, the way that it's been lately, seems like if it's too hard, I'm not going to do it. Like, well, first of all, if it's too hard, it's probably worth it. If it comes too easy, then anyone can do it. Can you imagine if everyone can go boating? You'd be like, why are you here? I was trying to get away from you. I saw you doing it. I thought I could too.
There's a big reward in the accomplishment of it, especially if you come to it understanding, well, this is not going to be this pretty rosy picture that a lot of people think it is. It's going to be hard, and then you manage to do it. Then that does feel really good. And I'm a huge fan of passages. With our longest passage was 10 days.
Nice.
And something about coming to the end of one of those, and you get all kinds of stuff in there, a lot of challenges in the midst of it, you know, bad weather, boat issues, whatever it might be. And when you get to the end of it, that's a really gratifying feeling to have done it. So
definitely have to be resourceful and mindful and a bit of a planner to be able to do that. Yeah. Because otherwise,
and flexible, very, 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 very flexible.
Yeah. See, I think I would be like the girl that like, give me the worst case scenario. Cause I always plan for the worst and hope for the best. But but at the same time, it means I'm prepared. So when that thing that was supposed to be like Z happens or D or whatever we're at, I'm like, I got it. I know what to do.
Yep. I'm ready.
You all can relax and stuff, but you'll survive because I was ready. Relax, Vivi, they said. Sure.
Living on a boat, we try not to think about the worst case scenario too much. You know,
I watched too many movies.
Yeah. Still haven't made my son watch Jaws yet, but it's coming.
Oh yeah. See, I would be like, I'm the girl too that'd be like, I can be friends with them. You know, that typical thing where the girl's like, oh, puppy, or oh, kitty, like that's a panther. It's a cute little kitty.
Yeah.
Cute little fish, like Bruce. Fish are our friends.
Fish are our friends.
Yeah. One day we'll see. It'll be good. It'd be nice to kind of have you back a few years into you being like, hey, how the land legs going?
Yeah. Like, oh, I can't wait to get a boat again.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Like, you can go back, right? At least you have that option later on. Versus like someone that hasn't. We're like, what we're gonna do now? people.
There's always a way. You can always figure out a way to get to some semblance of what you're dreaming of. Might not be the exact thing, but you can work your way. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, we've been talking about careers and work and all this fun stuff. So we're going to go into some more personal questions here now, if you're ready for them.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. Sure. And everybody's like, Viv, you're not that girl. I'm like, I know. I'm going to ask about like what he does for relaxing. So when you're not working, what do you do for fun aside from, boat life?
Oh, man, that's a tough one to answer. And the reason is, and this is, again, a reason why we are sort of gearing up to head back to land a little bit. I don't do a lot of free time stuff. It's something about myself that I have lost a little bit since we've been out here. And that's because the boat requires so much upkeep and fixing and care, and our lives require so much planning and eye on the weather and all this kind of stuff that I've gotten to a point where I have trouble relaxing and just enjoying myself, which is kind of a bad thing. Now, that's not to say I don't enjoy the stuff I do on the boat. I do. I'm that guy. I'm the guy that fixes stuff and is always messing around with something. So I guess you could say that's part of what I do. But aside from that, I love sports. I wasn't a big athlete when I was a kid, but as an adult, I really enjoy sports. And my son is just getting to that age where, he's learning how to throw and catch a football and he plays soccer. And so, a lot of my free time is we go do things with him and throw the football around or swim or, whatever it happens to be. As far as just for myself, I'd say the one thing that I don't do enough of, but that I really enjoy, and this is another boat life thing, is wing foiling. Have you ever heard of that?
No, what is that?
Okay, so it's like an SUP, like a stand-up paddleboard, but smaller, and it's got a foil on the bottom so that you can get up above the water. So when this board moves through the water, the foil on the bottom lifts it up so you're no longer touching the surface of the water. You're just kind of gliding.
Oh, okay.
And so there's a lot of different versions of that, but a wing foil is that, but you have an inflatable big wing thing in your hand catching the wind that allows you to basically sail on this board thing. It's really difficult, and I've hurt myself so many different times in different ways figuring out how to do it. But it's probably the one sort of new spare time thing that I picked up since we've been doing this that I do really enjoy it. I don't get out and do it enough. Look up wing foiling and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I'm going to.
It's pretty wild. It's a lot of fun. And then the other thing, what used to be my living is now my spare time, and that's music, playing guitar. And, we have put on a few concerts on the back of the boat. We'll probably do another one here in Grenada, where I'll just play an acoustic show on the back of the boat, amplified with lights and all the stuff. And people will show up in their dinghies from other boats. So the kids will swim and play behind the boat and just have a concert night. And we usually do that to benefit something in the vicinity where we are. Last year, it was a local family's home here in Grenada had burned down, and one of the kids was one of my son River's soccer mates. So that's how we knew about that. This year, we'll probably do Rise Grenada, which is the primary nonprofit that's helping to rebuild from the destruction from Hurricane Beryl that came through here before we got here this year. Wiped out the island of Carriacou, which is part of Grenada. So yeah, I'll do stuff like that. I'll play shows, maybe go out and play a gig here and there. But yeah, music and swimming around, playing stuff with my son. That's kind of that's the gamut of my free time right there.
It sounds, honestly, it sounds really good and nice. And that what's relaxing? Okay, got it. Downtime. I think sometimes we tend to forget that is, but it's also on your end because of the lifestyle. There's certain things that you're going, it's the same thing. Like, what is that? You're even though you're what we think is a nice, relaxing kind of situation, you're going, we'd be somewhere in the middle of nowhere if I didn't pay attention to where the boat was moving to, right?
Yeah,
things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
fantastic. Well, here's a good one because especially being a musician, I know that there's always that one song that it doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're in the car, on your boat, at a grocery store, or at a Target, whatever you want to say it. That when that song comes on, you're singing along to it. What's that song for you?
Oh man, it's a lot of them. It really is. I do that a lot. I probably annoy everybody around me because I can't not. Weirdly, the first one that comes to mind is not even a band that I'm not crazy about. And this is going to make me sound really old. I'm not as old as this song pick sounds. Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. I can't explain it. There's something about that song, and it gets played on radio. It gets played on the speakers at Target. It gets, it's one of those songs that pops up a lot. And there's just something about it that I cannot focus on anything else when that song comes on. I don't even own a Dire Straits album. I don't play any of their songs. They've got a few that I like, but I don't know what it is about that song. But it's the first thing that popped in my head when you said that, and it's true. Okay. If it comes on, I'm cranking it up. I can't help it. I don't know. I can't explain it. It makes me sound really old. I'm not quite that old. I still am kind of old, but
well, don't worry about it. I have freaked out many of people when they're like, how the hell do you know that song? And it was like 30 or 40 before, years before my time. And it's like, well, my mom used to listen to all this stuff. I mean, like I have everything from swing big band, but I also have Vikings and Celtic songs in my on my playlist and stuff like that. So it always would freak people out when I'm like word for word with the mamas and the papas and Elvis or some of the other ones, Under My Umbrella songs. They're like, how the hell you were born in 1980? You were like 20 or 30 years before your time. And I'm like, but man, that was good. Good
stuff. Yeah. I think Sultans of Swing, it is a little bit of one of those guitar god kind of songs. Yeah. Because Mark Knopfler is, widely considered one of the best guitar players ever. And like I said, I've never been like a huge fan, but in that song, I can hear it for sure. Yeah. And I hear some of the stuff he plays, and I'm like, I'll never play that.
Yeah. See, interesting enough, I think prior to us starting to record, I said something along the lines of being that friend that can make anything to a sexual innuendo. And you're like, oh, my wife and you will get along. On you and my husband would be like the BFFs between busting out with the guitars or singing and coming up with in vain Malstein, or, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to leave you alone.
Oh, you are going back into the 80s there.
Yeah. He's 8 years older than I am, but, but he loves his music too. So, it's just one of those things where like, you guys would just go.
oh yeah no doubt.
That'll be fun. Okay, I'll have to look that song up. I'm sure I've heard it, but the name doesn't sound familiar to me. So as soon as I look it up, I'm going, oh, that song, and then it's going to be stuck in my ears for the next couple of days. So thank you. Probably I will let you know.
Hey, you will thank me, I think. Yeah.
Okay, good. And at least now I know where it's coming from. Sometimes I'll get like, why am I singing this song? Oh, that's right, Eric. Thanks.
You are not the only one. No.
Yes. Okay, good. So we all have a favorite curse word. So this is a two-part question here. What's your favorite word that's not a curse word, but that's your favorite word? You work with words all day long anyway. So
favorite word that's not a curse word.
I guess what's your favorite word?
Because most of my favorite words are curse words. I don't know. I had a lot of words I hate.
I think we always go for that as a say. Like, there's words I'm like, but what do you love? Like, what's a good word for you? I guess it could be homework for next time.
It might have to be. That's a really tough one. I've got, as a narrator. I think I've curated a pretty strong list of words I really don't like because they're hard to get out in most sentences, and some of them are super simple. And I'm of course I'm not going to be able to think of them right here, but vehicle. I hate the word vehicle. Sorry, that's a little tangent. I might have to. I want to think about that. I might bust out an answer like right before you sign off. I'll be like, I've got it. This is my favorite word in the world.
If not, it's aside from just catching up, it's always a good reason to have you back. So no worries.
Yeah. All right. Just that one question.
Yeah. and another catch up kind of thing. Yeah. So what is your favorite curse word?
I use so many. I mean, I'm sorry for any religious folks out there, but I mean, I go to God damn it so often that, you know, my wife's got a pretty good cursing vocabulary too, but even she looks at me sometimes like, maybe a little less, you know. Yeah, son of a whore. I say that a lot. We're sailors, so we dip into a lot of it. Probably to the detriment of my son's vocabulary, but
well, they do say that those of us that do a lot of cursings are significantly smarter, but also live a lot longer.
that's all. Those are all good things.
Yes, yeah. It's just knowing when to use it. That's the thing too, and that's something too that I've always taught. Like when my niece, I knew that if that child ever got called into the principal's office because she says some like a curse word, I would be the one going to that meeting, and I was okay with it. But at the same time, I always stressed with these are not throwaway words. There's got to be a reason behind it. Now as an adult, you know, we get to do them as we wish, but also it just means something different. Like I usually say son of a bitch. I might be busting out with son of a whore just because the way that it sounds, you're like, you know, from that.
It feels better in the situation, sure.
Yes, certain situations. But yeah, so all right.
And if I'm by myself and I'm usually I'm working on something on the boat, like the curse words that come out of me are just more of a stream of consciousness blur of, you know, obscenity, you know, just son of a mother, just like all of it. Yeah. All of it. Everything I can dig up from that well all comes out in one long word. And that's, I'll spare you. I won't give you the full example. So
no worries. All right, we have come to the point where we get to play a game called Two Truths and a Lie, where we figure out how much creatively you can be, but also how much of a good liar you are. So you'll tell us 3 things about yourself, and then we'll try to figure out which one's the lie. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. Now, I will tell you, I did not prepare for this one. 2 truths and a lie. All right. Here's one. I ate breakfast next to Kenny Chesney. I sailed a catamaran 2,500 miles with only one functional motor. And I played starting quarterback for Ohio State for 1/4 of one season.
Oh man, good job without being quote unquote prepared. I always have said that things are in the details, but sometimes it could be one way or the other, and you just don't know. And you have thrown me in there for a doozy as far as like going, can you write a book for just one motor, or is that type?
I maybe it's a little unfair, but that's what you got.
No, that's what exactly. But that's how it's supposed to be too. There's also other things. Okay, so ate breakfast next to Kenny Chesney. It could have been lunch. You never know. Rode a very long time with only one the motor, or played start quarterback for a particular shorter season. Oh my goodness, all possible. Shoot. I'm also like, I know you said you didn't play sports growing up, but you did love it as an adult. See how I do pay attention, folks? But also the things that they don't say also means a lot. That we just don't know. Which one's the lie? Is the quarterback the lie?
The quarterback is the lie. The quarterback, that's a pretty laughable lie, really, if you knew me well. Yeah. No. I was trying to come up with a lie that was like super slick and slithery, and I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna give her this one should be a pretty easy one. No, we're my wife and I both graduated from Ohio State, and so that for some reason Ohio State football popped into mind, and I'm like, why not? I'll be the quarterback. Yeah.
But you were because of the fact that you said that you weren't into sports before, right? Or that you didn't play them as a kid. But as an adult, but the fact that you specifically said for like it was a shorter season, I'm like, well, he could have gone injured, you never know. But right. But I'm like, he knows a lot of boat stuff, so I'm sure he could probably ride and do anything with a boat, regardless of having an engine or not.
Yes, and we have. That's one problem we've been having with this boat is a bad port side motor, and it's pretty rare to have gone as far as we have with just the one. But we only anchor, so it's really not been that bad.
Okay,
that one's true.
Yeah, and the whole thing with you being a musician at one point in time, there's a possibility you said something.
Right. You'll notice I didn't say I had breakfast with them.
Yes, you said you sat
next to them. Yeah. No, I used to go down to Nashville a lot for the songwriting stuff, and down in Music Row, there's a lot of little restaurants and bars, and down there, the country stars just kind of walk around freely and nobody bothers them, which is really cool. It's an industry area, and there's just one particular restaurant called Nashville. That's like a Jewish deli breakfast lunch place. And one day I was in there having breakfast, and he walked in with a couple people and sat down in the booth next to me, and they just went about their business meeting. And of course, back then I'm like, oh my God, a skinny Chizzy, he's right here next to me. But I kept my cool. I didn't say anything. I just ate my breakfast and left. Yeah.
Yeah. See? Okay, cool. Well, yeah, see, that was a good one. You did good on the fly there.
Yeah. I remember that was in one of your emails, and somehow when I was doing my prep work, I glossed over that one. So
it's okay, it happens. But yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, any dead air would have been removed anything, because again, that's the magic of the editing button.
Right.
And it would have been like smooth sailing, like as if you did do your homework. You never knew.
Right.
All right. Perfect.
Right. You can tell. It's okay. I've never been great at homework, so
it's okay. But again, these are questions that I'm like, there's been some that have been on the fly, and they have been so good, and others I'm going, or they've prepared for it, but in conversation, part of the story comes into play, and then now they have to change it when it comes up, because they already kind of already told on themselves a little bit.
Well, I forgot that I told you that I didn't really do well in sports, and I'm like, oh wow, I gave that away, didn't I? Yeah,
that's okay. But again, I do pay attention, so that's the difference. Yeah, someone else may not have. Yeah, you would think, but that's a different episode for a different day. The other thing too that I did say in advance is I've been having not for a few months now, having the conversation about guilty pleasures, because we tend to think of it as a taboo thing, or in some cases, and I do love my listeners and my reader friends, but they're like, ooh, guilty pleasure. I'm like, stop it. It's not the Red Room we're talking about here. I'm talking about like eating ice cream for dinner, folks. Okay.
Right.
That's not something on air conversation. That is like at a bar, sitting at someone's house, or in a boat saying girl or dude, but not on air.
Right.
So what are some of your guilty pleasures?
Yeah, I had that same conversation with my wife. I'm like looking at that, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I don't really have a lot of guilt about things. Like if I'm enjoying something, I don't worry too much about it. And she's like, I think you may be overthinking this a little bit. So what I guess what I've come up with for my guilty pleasures, rum is kind of a big one for me. And again, I drank a lot of bourbon when we were on land. But once we came down here into the Caribbean, there's just rum is everywhere. Yeah. And I'm not an expensive drinker. I'm not one of these guys that you're going to walk in and they've got a bar with, and this is my, I don't know, whatever, Johnny Walker Red that it cost me $500, or Pappy Van Winkle, or whatever it might be. I can't do it. I couldn't, I don't think I could even take a swallow of that glass without seeing the dollar signs, But down here, rum is so good, and it's so smooth, and they make it everywhere. They make it, all these islands seem to have sort of a banner brand. And I've just found a couple down here that I just absolutely love, and I sit and sip rum on the rocks, sit down on the side of the boat at night and play my guitar. And that's kind of my happy place. So it's definitely an indulgence. I don't feel guilty at all about it, really.
Yeah.
So
that's good. I think that's part of this kind of having this dialogue is and including it is just to normalize pleasure, regardless of what that looks like, and without being guilty, because we're so taught that if we're not constantly working, you're lazy, or that these are the rules. You can't not have ice cream for dinner because, fill in the blanks. I'm like, but I just want chocolate chip ice cream.
Right. Yeah.
Damn it.
Guilt is, don't get me wrong. Like if you kill somebody, Probably feel guilty. Guilt, though, I think the kind of guilt that we've been taught to feel in the U.S. particularly is so far over the top, and it's just so funny. That's another sailing life thing. There's a lot of French islands down here: Guadeloupe, Saint Martin, Martinique, and we love those islands. But the funny thing is, if you're anchored out here near French boats, you better be okay with seeing some nudity. Yeah. Yeah.
We is just the body.
Yeah. This is my penis. Yeah. I'm washing it right now. Why are you watching me? But it is like culturally a thing that in the US for decades we've kind of been taught to be so ashamed of like our bodies and like so ashamed of everything, really,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, look, if you go to Europe, they have like in Spain, they have siesta, and in Italy, they have other things where you don't.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, they don't go out in business after 3 or something, and I'm like, oh my god, that would take me a while. Like, what do you mean siesta? What do you mean a nap? No, I don't nap.
and we have kind of gotten accustomed to that because that's sort of the culture down here in the islands, as well as the French islands, the Dutch islands. A lot of places close. It's early. They close in the middle of the day. You don't know when they're going to be open. And then I feel really damn good after a nap in the middle of the afternoon. And usually I get a lot done afterwards. So works out pretty well. Yeah.
It can. Yeah, it definitely can.
Yeah. So that's one of my pleasures is I like to take naps in the afternoon too. Yeah. So.
I wish, I've tried. I'm just not that girl. I have enough trouble sleeping when I'm supposed to. But if I could just, even just the idea of just laying down and not doing anything, that's where I'm like, oh, okay. I just got to get better at it. So I do hope that once you come back to the land and you start living on back here kind of thing, that you still maintain that. Because it's important. I think sometimes we tend to be so much into the work, busy kind of thing that we forget that we have to enjoy ourselves. Life's way too short.
Right. And it happens to everybody. It doesn't matter what lifestyle you live. You still can get caught up in that pretty easily.
Absolutely. Well, I can keep talking to you for another couple of eons if we needed to. But before we go, tell us what you're currently working on and what's coming up next for you.
Well, right now, sorry, my wife is walking by and writing answers on my paper in front of me. She was sneaking.
Thank you, wife.
Yeah, Lauren. She just wrote down air conditioning is our guilty pleasure.
As a Florida girl, I get you.
And it's hot. It's really hot down here, and most boats out here at anchor, we don't have air conditioning because the only way to get it is to run your generator if you have it at all on your boat. And that's something just recently kind of got working on this boat. I got the generator and the air conditioners all working, but then you gotta burn a lot of diesel to make it happen. So we run our air conditioner at night now. And she's right, that is kind of our not so pleasure. Like every night we're like, oh yeah, let's fire this baby up, it's getting cool in here finally, Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that distracted me for a second, but she had a very good point.
It's a good distraction. It's good. It's fine. I've always have guests like, oh, pardon the dogs barking or the kids. I'm like, first of all, no one's paying me for this, or to hear it. Right? This is not an audiobook. You should not hear dogs in audiobooks, folks, just in case. But interruptions, stuff like that—that's life. I'm all for it. I'm glad that she came in. And said, honey, seriously, air conditioning.
Air conditioning. She's like, come on, that's like obvious.
Oh, she's awesome.
I lost track. What did you ask me last?
I was asking you because again, we can continue talking, but I wanted to see about what you're currently working on now that you can share and what's coming up next for you as well.
Oh, okay. I'm working on a Kathleen Brooks book this week, which she's, if you're familiar with her, she's a romance novelist. I've done dozens of books for her, and it's really fun because she writes all these quirky hometown characters that come back into these books, every single book, and even from shoot off series. They cross intermingle. So that's what I'm working on right now is her latest book. And some of the more recent ones I've done, I just got done with a book called Agony Hill by Sarah Stewart Taylor, which was just so good. It was set in the 1960s, kind of a cozy mystery, very much like a slow burn kind of book, and I love those. But I got a Toni Anderson book coming up, so doing a lot of romance right now.
I love Toni.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Her suspense, and I just feel like her research into the crimes and the process and all that is so good that it just feels very, very real in her books.
Yeah, I'm going, Toni. Do we need to wipe your computer when you become no longer with us?
I know, yeah. Like some of the stuff she got into in the last couple of books, it's like, wow, that's dark.
Yeah.
But
talk about hiding the bodies.
Yeah, it makes you care. That's what's important, you know?
Absolutely.
And then of course, I'm going to be going into the studio to narrate my second book here in just a couple of weeks, because like I said, I'm almost done with it. And the fun thing about being an author and narrator is that your narrating process can actually be one of your edits, which is pretty cool, because I don't really miss too much when I'm narrating a book as far as mistakes and editorial stuff. So that'll probably kind of be my final pass through that I do on it. Yeah, looking forward to that, and a lot of other stuff coming up in the future too. So
yeah, and hopefully once you get back on land, you'll be wanting to do some events so we can see you and meet you in person and get you to sign some of our treasures.
I would love to do that. Yeah. That's something I've not really done. I would love to go do things like that.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Okay, we'll talk.
Yeah. I know people.
And you know where their bodies are hidden. So
in some cases, yes, I do.
Yeah.
So like, hey, that favor, remember? Yeah.
Right. Time to cash in.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This has been lots of fun. I really appreciate you.
I very much enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. I've gone through 2 cups of coffee while we've done this. So If my energy has changed, it's like a trajectory. That's why. You know?
No, they're good. For a second there, I'm going, were you drinking rum? Damn, but no, coffee's good.
Right. Totally different vibe if I was drinking rum.
Yeah. Yes. That's Enchantress After Dark's episode. Yeah. But thank you again. And folks, if you are not following him on socials, I'll be providing you with all the links, including the YouTube, so you can see all the stuff that he's been doing as far as boat life goes over at this episode's page over at Viviana Enchantress of Books. But until next time, happy listenings.
Thank you to all of our Audiobook Lovin Podcast Patreon. The Audiobook Lovin Podcast has special Patreon access levels. Join today to receive benefits including early access to episodes, shout-outs, special exclusive content, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobookloving. We thank you for your support.
Thank you for joining us on the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. For links and more information discussed in today's episode, previous podcasts, or the Audiobook Lovin Series, please visit our website, vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast. Until next time, happy listening.